Hi, I'm Peter Samuelson, and here we are on leadership and loyalty. And today we're going to talk about the double bottom line, how to make the world a better place and make yourself happier as an entrepreneur, as a business person, while you do that.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, he's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Hey, would you do me a quick favor? Send me a note, DM me on one of the 4 big social media outlets and tell me what platform you use to listen to us. Is it Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts? Whatever it is, you let us know. And while you're at it, tell us one of your favorite episodes, because I'm going to pick a winner and offer a very nice prize for that person. So let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Well, let's start here. Have you considered your other bottom line? Now, of course, to stay in business, you've got to take care of the conventional bottom line, the one that measures fiscal performance. However, there is another bottom line that measures your performance in terms of positive social impact, not just on your culture, but on the extended community that you are part of. Well, stay tuned, because that's where we're going on today's show. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. Curious to know more? Simply go to dovbaron.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how can we bring people together who completely disagree? This is exactly what your mind, your heart, your soul has been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some real and oftentimes intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people, including astronauts, neuroscientists, philosophers, holy people, quantum physicists, skeptics, Grammy Award-winning entertainers, and some folks you might think you would completely disagree with, but you'll find truly fascinating. In fact, one of the guests on that show is our guest today. So if you enjoy today's show and you want to go deeper with our guest, Peter Samuelson, you'll be able to do that on Curiosity Bites. Simply go to dovbaron.com and find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into the delicious Curiosity Bites. As always, you can find both of our shows on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. And we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get over to wherever you tune into and do us a favor, would you? Rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for sharing the show with everybody you know, because you've made us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And we're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. In the last 10 or so years, entrepreneurs and businesses have been asking, is there a way to do well as an organization while doing good in the world? If there's any doubt, then you got to stay tuned, because our guest today is Peter Samuelson. He is the co-founder and president of First Star and CEO of PhilmCo Media. Peter Samuelson is a serial pro-social entrepreneur. In 1982, he co-founded the Starlight Children's Foundation, and by 1990, the positive psychological impact of Starlight seeded his next pro-social endeavor, which is called Starbright World, which he co-founded with Steven Spielberg. You might have heard of that bloke. In 1999, saw the formation of First Star, and in 2005, EDAR, which is Everyone Deserves a Roof. In 2013, he launched Aspire, which is an academy for social purpose in responsible entertainment. And in the midst of all this, Peter has produced 26 films, raised 4 children. He was educated at Cambridge and Anderson School of Management at UCLA. Peter and his wife, Saryl, continue to fight every day for those less fortunately than him. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome champion for America's abused and neglected children, Mr. Peter Samuelson.
Proud roar. Thanks, Doug.
Hey, mate, always a pleasure and an honor to speak with you. We always like to start the show in the same place, which is in the context of leadership development. You know, I'm brought in to answer difficult questions for companies and organizations. And oftentimes I'll say, you know, I can't answer your question because you're asking the wrong question. So in your mind, what is the question that we're not asking that we need to ask in the context of leadership development? You know, where do we need to be saying, you know, we need to answer this question, not all this other stuff? What do you think it is?
I think that we have created a false binary in teaching leadership, where we, in our MBA classes, we're talking about how to serve the stockholders. In rare cases, how to serve the stockholders, do right by the staff. In even rarer cases, how to serve the stockholders, do right by the staff, and maybe lift up the communities where our offices or depots or stores are. I think it's quite rare for us to teach the fundamentally important pillar of leadership, which is, dare I say, to try to make, in a big or a little way, the world a better place. Most of us have noticed that the world is considerably broken. I actually think in my whole lengthy adult life, it's more broken now than it was when I started being an adult, yay, those many years ago. So if it's broken, the first mistake we make is thinking that they who exhibit entrepreneurship and leadership in business should sort of point it at business and serving the stockholders. God bless. I'm you know, as big a capitalist as the next guy. I believe in, you know, mostly free markets with a few exceptions. But I also believe that we live on a planet, we live in cities and communities and countries, and we need to exert ourselves. The second mistake we make in leadership is that we take someone who is adept in some subset of leadership and they're really good at it, and if they do work with or for a charity, they're put to work, you know, licking stamps for envelopes or something. We tend not to ask them to do that which they are skilled at, which is a big mistake and a loss of expertise for those nonprofits. Generally speaking, nonprofits are really good at program, not very good at raising money, awful at PR, produce some of the worst videos ever seen in the world, are not good at telling their story.
Right.
And yet we take people and we say, well, can you drive the truck? Well, sure I can, but that's not really how I think I can help the best. So I think it's time for a rethink. There are a few business schools where within the leadership MBA continuum, there is nonprofit, double bottom line, you know, NGO kind of leadership stuff. Wharton School has one of them. There are a few others, but actually it's not necessary for someone to learn the zeal to apply their leadership abilities to make the world a better place. You don't have to go to college or university and do a grad school, whatever course. You can just decide to do it. And I think it's a great shame. For example, look at most entrepreneurs. Look at the top 1,000 entrepreneurs. There is a tiny proportion of them who have repetitively entrepreneured. There are some, you know, old Elon Musk, you know, he's in space and he invented the car and sent one to outer space. And some aliens at some point in the future are going to be very surprised when they find a capsule with a Tesla in it. But then, he said, why don't we do maglev for mass transportation in tunnels? With the, I think, genius name, he incorporated it in Nevada as the Boring Company.
That was clever, right?
What wonderful name. So there are exceptions, but I think generally you meet with an entrepreneur and they've done one thing.
Yes.
And almost always it's a for-profit thing. There's nothing the matter with that. But that same skill set, you could do it again.
So let's take that for a minute, because I talked about in the introduction the term pro-social entrepreneur, that you are a pro-social entrepreneur, a serial pro-social entrepreneur. So just to give people context, and I know you've touched on it here, but what is, just so in the simplest possible form, what is a pro-social entrepreneur, so that people can go put their hand up and go, yeah, I want to be that?
It is a person who takes it upon themselves to invent, develop, pilot, and measure a new solution to an old, intractable problem. I think in a nutshell, that's it. Only because I know them best, my 4 or 5 of them. Seriously ill kids are sad. When a human being is sad, their immune system is compromised in many cases, and they don't get better as well as if you could make them a bit happy. How do we make them happy? What could we put together as an entity with thousands of volunteers? Not at the beginning. I mean, we had 10 volunteers, but how could we create a machine to make seriously ill kids happy? Oh, and their parents seem to be a bit sad. Let's work on that too. Oh, and the siblings. Let's work on that too. And that became the Starlight Children's Foundation. And Steven Spielberg and I put this thing together, and it really works. And it's raised and spent well over $1 billion in its 34 years on the planet. And that's Starlight. Another one.
How many billion did you say there?
Just over $1 billion, $1,000 million. And the work of thousands of volunteers and dedicated staff, and at this point fully professionalized in Australia and Canada and United States and the UK. But it all started honestly in a closet on Melrose Boulevard in Los Angeles. We used to joke it was the only office that any of us had ever seen where if you lay on the floor, you could touch all 4 walls at once with your limbs. So it started very small. It started with an experience. My cousin met a seriously ill boy who was in hospital in London, and she asked him, what would make you really happy, Sean? And Sean said, oh, that's easy. I want to go to Disneyland. And the cousin phoned me in a panic, said, I seem to have promised this very terribly ill, terminally ill boy and his mum that we're going to bring them to Los Angeles. How do we do that from London? And I said, well, I'm a film producer. We can do anything. And always a different thing each time, but the same skill sets. So we did that, and he had an amazing time. And he went home to London and he passed away. And we realized that not only had we made him happy, but we'd made the mum happy. And she had some memories and some Polaroid pictures, shows how long ago it was, of her kid not in a hospital bed, and enjoying Disneyland and all that kind of thing. And I'm the one that I called a meeting, of like 10 people. I was running a film company called Interscope at the time. And I simply called a meeting after work and invited a bunch of people. And I just sort of stood there and said, here's what we just did. Do you think maybe there are other ill children in hospital? we would have to go and ask, but we could ask them what would make them happy, and then we could do it. So I thought we would do, a wish every 2 months at the beginning. Right. And then all of a sudden it was thousands of wishes. And it was, as I said, $1 billion deployed in generating joy for the seriously ill child and their family, not necessarily terminally ill. And then the next one, I read some sort of official documents put out by UNICEF, and I read the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and it dawned on me that foster kids don't go to university. Less than 9% go, and yet less than 3% earn a degree, which is complete raving madness if you think that these are kids by definition who've been abused or neglected, and they have nothing to pivot them towards the light. What would be the absolutely best thing you could do? Get them an education. Right. But of course, it's not simple. The devil is always in the details. You can't simply snap your fingers and say, let's send these terribly poorly educated kids from year 12 or 12th grade. Let's send them all to college. You can't do that. They would all drop out, or most of them. You have to get them ready. So what I did, and this became First Star, was to pilot with UCLA, house, educate, and encourage foster kids for the 4 years of high school, grades 9 through 12, on the campus of a great, big, excellent university, hire undergrad and grad students to be the youth mentors, have them residential in the summer, non-residential the rest of the year, bring them in once a month on a Saturday, and a lot online, and build a family, build a community. And you heard me say 9% of American foster kids go to college. First Star kids, average of the last 3 years, over 18 academies. First Star foster kids, average of the last 3 years, over 18 academies, 87% to colleges and universities. Half to 4 year, half to 2 year. So really works. Or
fantastic.
Final one, as an example, I met an old lady. I did interviews with unhoused people. We used to call them homeless people, but the politically correct term now is unhoused.
Right.
And I asked the old lady, where do you sleep at night? And she took me by the sleeve onto the wasteland next to the San Diego freeway, just south of Santa Monica Boulevard. And she said, this is where I sleep at night. And there was a big, shitty, damp cardboard box. And on the side of it, in foot-high letters, it said Sub-Zero. And I thought, aha, I have the refrigerator, and this old lady has the box. Something the matter with this picture. So initially I thought, I know how to raise money. I'll build a dormitory building with 100 beds in it. I wonder what that would cost. I hired some people, an architect and a budgeter and this and that. And we worked out it was about $5 million. Buy the land, build the building, not to run it, just to put it up and kit it out. Yeah. So divide 5 million by 100, that's $50,000 per bed generated. Multiply $50,000 per bed by 100,000 unhoused people in Los Angeles County, and that's $5 billion. I have no idea how to raise $5 billion, and I do not believe in our lifetime we will ever see a serious dent at $50,000 per capita on the behalf of the taxpayers, the city council, the county board of supervisors. It's just that they'll do 100 beds here and 100 beds there, maybe, but they're not going to put a dent in 100,000 people who are out on the streets. And I think it's disgusting. I think it is the weakest link that is always what determines the strength of the chain, in this case of our civilization. So I thought, well, we can't afford to build buildings. I thought, I wonder what's the best we could do with $800 a head. Like, surely it would be better than a crappy cardboard box on a rainy night, wouldn't
Absolutely.
it? And I ran a competition at the Pasadena Art Center College of Design, and we had a prize. And the prize was for a four-wheeled thing, didn't have a name at the beginning, which in the daytime you would push it around, and functionally, it could look like whatever you want, but functionally it would be like a very big shopping cart. But at night, you would be able to unfold it, and you would now have a 7-foot-long cot with a mattress off the ground, because that's how unhoused people die, is from pneumonia, because they lie on the ground and they get a bug and then they die. And that's why their life expectancy is like 40. So we ran the competition, and I've been working with the winner of the competition, Eric Lindemann, ever since. It's called EDAR, EDAR, because everyone deserves a roof. So edar.org. And it is exactly what I just said. It's an $800 four-wheeled mobile single-person homeless shelter on a scale of 10. If a bed in an apartment is a 10 and the old lady's cardboard box is a 0, we're about a 5. On a good day, we're a 5. On a bad day, we're a 4. But it is an awful lot better and vastly more affordable than the apartment, and an awful lot better than the cardboard box.
Well, last time we spoke, you were expecting a shipment. You were waiting for it to come off the container. The last time we spoke,
yes,
there was a certain amount of them, and then you were going to put them out there.
Yeah, and we've done that, and we're on to our second container now. We've got them all over the place on Skid Row in Los Angeles, on the west side of LA and up in the valley. We've got some up in Napa Valley in the north, and we now have some in Las Vegas. Did you know that there are between 2,000 and 4,000 human beings who live in the storm drain system under the Las Vegas Strip? It's like something out of a science fiction, a dystopian future science fiction film. Anyway, there is a ginormous Las Vegas in the shadow of very tall fantasy casino hotel complexes. You have these souls living in the sewers.
Yeah, I remember when they, because Vegas is so dry, but they had a flash flood, and
a lot of them died.
And a lot of them died, for that reason, because they just didn't expect that, and suddenly they were gone, because they live in what seems like somewhat of a dry area, but then suddenly it's not. These things that you're doing are obviously very powerful, and I want people to grasp the idea, because they go, okay, so, here's Peter talking about this, but he's a movie guy, he knows Steven Spielberg. Who am I? What can I do? I look past the unhoused in Vancouver, where I am, and there's a lot here, like a ridiculously high ratio, one of the highest ratios in the world, certainly in North America. And, they go, well, there's nothing I can do, but that's not true, right? So, just as we get towards the end of this section of part one of our 2-part conversation here, what can people actually do? Like, who are, we're talking to leaders right now. We're talking to business people. What can they do?
Well, the listeners can't hear me, but I'm raising my hand like a kind of papal message to Mr. D. Barron. And I'm saying, Dov Barron, get some EDARs to the homeless folk, the unhoused of Vancouver. Even, how about this? We have a Canadian entrepreneur who has been, they are about to import some EDARs from the same factory with our blessing. Why don't we do a little Vancouver experiment? And, you have some pull and some connections. Why don't we pilot a little Canadian distribution? We didn't need to go mad. What if we did 6 of them and then saw whether they were any good? My concern in Vancouver would be temperature.
Yes.
Like how is an EDAR up that far north in February would be a concern. But there may be things to do about that, like a sub-zero sleeping bag as a mandatory additional donation to the person. And then there's also the fact that some locations, they use the EDARs indoors.
Right.
In an existing shelter that has limited number of beds, and every night they turn people away, this could give them an extra umpteen beds. I remember one Christmas at the Union Rescue Mission on Skid Row in LA, they moved all the pews in the chapel up to the front, and they put women and children in EDARs in the back half of the chapel, while they put the men in like a conga line of EDARs up the side of a wide corridor. And it just, they had the staff, and they had the heat, and they had the light. All they needed was some extra beds with privacy, which is what the EDAR gives. Anyway, it's edar.org. But back to your original question as we, close the segment, sort of what is it? It is the application of entrepreneurial skills, probably developed elsewhere in the for-profit arena, but to bring a new solution to an old intractable problem and to pilot it. You don't have to do everywhere all at once. Howard Schultz started with one coffee bar. Start in one location, do a little bit of it, measure it, prove that it's good, and then move on.
So even if people went to your EDAR site, if they're a business person and say, okay, well, I'd like to do something about that in Ohio, in another city, in Calgary, or wherever it might be, they can find out more about it by going there, right?
Yeah, edar.org, edar.org.
Fabulous. Well, as we come towards the end of this particular segment, we're going to come back for more of our delicious conversation with Peter Samuelson, talking about pro-social entrepreneurship and about the importance of how leadership can be about something much bigger than the way we've thought about it, and how you can apply your entrepreneurial and your business skills to making a difference in the world. We're very grateful to have Peter Samuelson with us today. We're going to be back for part 2 of our delicious conversation with Peter in just one click. Till then, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. We'll see you in one click.